Listen, if we even think you owe us money, you won't know what hit you. We'll put liens on everything you own. Raid your bank accounts, retirement fund, pension. You'll open up your paycheck and cry because we'll already have the money. We'll haul you into federal court and you might even go to jail. Hey, it's our job.
Don't fight the IRS alone. The Tax Doctor is here to help you negotiate your tax bill and reduce your stress. Our experts will fight for you using IRS guidelines to stop any IRS actions like bank levies or wage garnishments. Plus, eliminate penalties and interest and reduce your past tax bill so you pay the IRS less. Help is here to deal with the IRS to reduce your stress. If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, do not call the IRS alone. Call a tax doctor now for a tax emergency analysis.
I'd have my mom call the number on the screen. You come see me alone. We'll work it out. Really, we will.
Did you know that thousands of authors across the country have written books and published them with Page Publishing? If you've written a book, Page Publishing can help you through the process. We cut through the confusion of the publishing world to make it easy for you. If we decide to publish your book, your work ends and ours begins. From copy editing and proofing to typesetting and book cover art, we get you printed, distributed, and sold on Amazon, Apple iTunes, and in bookstores across the country. We'll even help you promote your book. That's right, we do all this for you. Biography, self-help, mystery, novels, sci-fi, even a children's book. No matter what genre, Page Publishing can bring your book to life. Call today for your free author submission kit and find out how you can be the next published author at Page Publishing.
Call for your free author submission kit at 855-993-2114. That's 855-993-2114.
Hello everybody, Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is the Schaftlein Report. It's Tuesday's edition, and we're broadcasting from Northern and Southern California today. Happy to have you with us. Drew, welcome back to the show. Well, we always have a lot to talk about, and this week is no exception. You know, we've been sitting here, and our audience has seen this over the past 3 years, where Republicans have been calling on Joe Biden to get his butt down to the border. And yet he steadfastly refused. We sent the esteemed Kamala Harris down to El Paso, and that did no good on anything. Drew, now we have a situation where former President Trump and current President Biden will both be at the border on Thursday, albeit 300 miles apart. I tell you something, to me, this looks bad for Biden. I don't care how they're trying to spin it at the White House. Give me your thoughts on what's happening here with dueling presidents at the border.
Yeah, I don't think that Biden and the Democrats, no matter what they stage and do, can really win the propaganda war that they're engaged in. Because remember, the whole bill that they wanted to pass that we've discussed, which, border security was like number 10 on the list, but they said it was a border bill. And it wasn't actually a border bill. It was like the Inflation Reduction Act. It wouldn't have secured the border, but they were trying to pass that in the Senate and saying that Trump intervening and saying, don't sign this bill, that this was a Republican issue, that Democrats were suddenly trying to secure the border and Republicans didn't want to solve the crisis. I think the American people, enough of them are smart enough to know that that's baloney. And I just don't know. I mean, it'll be interesting to see. Last time there was a border visit by the president, they cleaned up the streets. They got rid of all the people. They cleaned out the centers. And, kind of like they did in San Francisco when they cleaned out the homeless when Xi Jinping came in. But you're going to have Trump down there as well. So this will be fascinating. I think this will be kind of a defining moment of the political campaign because Trump just spoke at CPAC. It's very clear he's going to be the nominee. People are expecting that. So to see the two current presidential candidates going head to head down there at the same time, I think that watching this will tell us a lot about the direction this election season is going to go.
Well, let me give you a little bit of statistics here, Drew, and this doesn't surprise me at all. Joe Biden's approval rating among American voters, 35% approve the way he's handling this border crisis. A whopping 57% do not. It has emerged, Drew, really equally with the economy as the number one issue in the country right now. And when you take the other pieces that go with it, the crime, the fentanyl, the human trafficking, I mean, this is disgusting stuff that we're seeing out there. And let me give you how it breaks down Democrats, Republicans, Independents. 73% of Democrats, they approve of that border policy. I mean, how in the world you get 73% of anybody to agree on that in one party? That to me, it's just incredible. Contrast that, Republicans, 4%. I want to know who the 4% who actually believe in it. But the most important number came out of that statistical sample. Only 35% of independents approve of that. And I got news for you, Drew. If that's the breakdown as it comes, and that's the number one or number two issue facing the American people, that is not going to bode well for Joe Biden. And it just strikes me as another issue where the people handling the president, those mysterious people inside the White House, I could repeat their names, but no one's going to remember them anyhow. They are controlling what he does. And I got to be honest with you, you and I oppose his policies. Okay, that's been well documented. But this is actually political malfeasance. It's just ineptitude that they would take an 81-year-old man who has shown no interest in going down to the border, and because Trump has elevated the issue, now Biden's going to look like he's inferior. Am I missing something here, or is that how you're seeing it too?
Well, I see it that way too. I mean, all of these attempts are going to backfire on them. I mean, how do you save yourself from this border crisis situation? I mean, how do you save yourself from the economy? I mean, you can only lie so much and expect the American people to reject the actual facts on the ground that they're witnessing and seeing and processing with their own experience. So, I mean, look, let's hope for the sake of the country that the American people aren't going to buy any of this stuff and they will actually use their own brains and experience. I mean, it's like when you find yourself struggling to pay your bills because the prices of energy have gone up and so on and so forth, and then you turn on the TV and Karine Jean-Pierre is telling you that you've never had more money in your pocket before. Are people really going to believe that? Or are they going to be upset about the fact that they can't pay their energy bill and vote to change that situation?
I think it's going to be the latter because, again, I think this issue, when we boil it down, Drew, into the border, it's not just that people are coming across the border and the things that go with it. Again, the human trafficking, that's bad enough. The fentanyl, that's horrific. Just the human cost of this. And then what a lot of the mainstream media and the liberal Democrats don't want you to know, okay, so all these illegal immigrants are mainly pouring into blue cities. I mean, not all, but they mainly are. And now all of a sudden, the people on the liberal Democratic side who said, oh, it's just a bunch of white guys, you guys are all racist, you're homophobes, you're this, you're that. All of a sudden they're saying, wait a minute, we can't handle this. Something's got to be done about this. So again, all the lies that came out of the Democrats when they tried to make it believe it was something other than it really is, now the human toll is starting to come to the forefront. And when you have cities bursting at the seams like Denver, Colorado, Chicago, New York City, even certain cities out west, Los Angeles to a degree, San Diego, a lot of people are starting to cross into San Diego now. You're seeing budget stretch. You're seeing hotels that used to be tourist hotels. Now they're illegal immigrant hotels. The budget's giving people cell phones when they come across, EBT cards. Yes, I mean, I've seen some studies on the economic side that, this government spending has been a boom to the economy. Listen, it's government borrowing and spending is what happened. Anytime you throw, what is the number, I think, Drew, under the Biden administration, and this might be conservative, folks, 7.3 million illegal immigrants in the country just since he became president, about 2.5 million per year. Now, when you give goodies to 7+ million people, that is going to have some effect on the economy. But Drew, it's borrowed money. And if that's what's keeping the economy afloat, that leads to what the anxiety that Americans are experiencing when they keep getting told the economy's really great. We grew near 3%. The inflation's coming down. But if those gains are the result of government large spending, then it's not going to filter down into people's pocket, is it?
No, look, Look, we're living in fantasy land right now, and it's only a matter of time if we continue on this trajectory that chaos that we've never even fathomed is going to take place. I mean, look, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, that economic crisis back in 2007 and afterwards, the financial crisis, that was a long time coming. And then a moment came and it collapsed. We're looking at that times 1,000 right now, and nobody can comprehend fully what's going on. I mean, we have so much funny money out there with the printing money and so on and so forth. Meanwhile, we've got the Chinese that are finally getting Saudi Arabia to trade oil in yuan and so on and so forth. I mean, we're just looking at calamity and we're kind of just biding our time right now. And nobody knows what the straw that breaks America's back is going to be. But certainly the illegal immigration factor is contributing to an escalation and certainly an exacerbation. I mean, it's like a hyperchamber. It's going to make that outcome that nobody wants to experience. It's going to make the Great Depression look like the best time in American history. It's going to make it come that much quicker.
Well, I tell you one thing, if you want to transform the country, which is what the Democrats appear to be wanting to do, look no further than what happened in our ally England. I mean, that country experienced massive migration, and at certain points of England, you don't even recognize the country anymore. So again, this is not a black, brown, or white issue. This is an American issue to where we have got to get this right. And again, the President Trump has said it many times, if you don't have a border, you don't have a country. Speaking of Trump, let's wade into Michigan politics a little bit. Not a lot of action, except Drew, a lot of Democratic leftists, a la Rashida Tlaib et al. I never thought I'd be on the side of Rashida Tlaib on anything, but she is of the ilk that the Israelis are in the wrong, the Palestinians are right, and again, she, in my view, she represents Palestine, not the United States Congress. Anyhow, her and her minions have been out all over the state of Michigan encouraging people not to vote for Joe Biden. Now, Drew, he's not even really resisting it anymore. I mean, the United States policy towards Israel effectively has been straddling between what the Palestinians want and what the Israelis want, but he's not even on the Israeli side anymore. I mean, he has shifted full support Palestine to the degree where they use the word ceasefire. Okay. I don't know if you all saw the clips last night, but honest to God, I mean, we criticize the president over his policies a lot, but Drew, that was embarrassing last night. I mean, he's in an ice cream shop, sticking a big cone of ice cream up to his face, and some reporter asked him a question about, a very sensitive subject, ceasefire and hostages, and sort of just nonchalantly Biden says, well, we hope to have a deal by the weekend to have the hostage released and have a ceasefire. Drew, again, am I being too harsh on the president? That just did not look presidential to me, and it looked like he was sort of caught out of the blue.
Well, it's also looks bad for the rest of his administration and the people that are handling him. I mean, look, when you're the president of the United States, everything you do is scrutinized. And so when you're at an ice cream parlor or whatever else, that's by design. When you have reporters in there, that's by design. This is what you can call it propaganda if you want. I honestly, Mark, cannot understand what message I'm supposed to get every time I see him eating an ice cream cone. I mean, they do this deliberately. Like, I genuinely, I'm perplexed. Like, what is the ice cream cone supposed to symbolize? Like, he's like a little kid. I mean, do you understand? I don't understand. It's like the weirdest thing they're doing, putting him in an ice cream shop all the time. It doesn't make him look good. I just don't know what I'm supposed to take. I want Karine Jean-Pierre to say, hey, tell the American people what they're supposed to think from the ice cream propaganda, because we're confused.
I'm confused too, because you're right. I mean, we see this guy in an ice cream parlor more than we see him doing press releases at the White House. So, I mean, it's a really bizarre situation. Let me go back to Michigan for just a second, though. I know it's tough to prognosticate how Democrats are going to vote, but any idea how many people you think will vote uncommitted when the results come out of the Michigan primary tonight, Drew?
I think it'll be a smaller percentage than there should be. I mean, look, they've got these these primaries pretty locked down and pretty controlled. Remember, they moved South Carolina because they felt that Joe Biden had a 100% chance of winning South Carolina. They apparently don't want there to be anyone opposing him or contending for the Democrat nomination, right? RFK Jr. is running as an independent. He didn't even challenge Joe Biden. So the way they've got their hands in all these different primaries, we'll see. I mean, it will be kind of telling though, because, one, I just think it's fascinating that we're having a conversation about this. I mean, you have Rashida Tlaib, who is actually going out and trying to get people to show their opposition to Joe Biden because he doesn't hate Jews enough. I mean, that's amazing.
I never thought I'd see the day, but here we are. October 7th happens. The Israelis lose 1,800 citizens, rape, murder, slaughter. And rightfully so, the Israelis are defending their country, trying to eliminate Hamas. And all the while, they're still hostage families. They're sensitive to that. They're trying to work through a solution. I just never in my wildest dreams thought we would be in a situation where we would have a partisan divide over something like this. Now, to the American people's credit, it's not even close. I mean, like 78, 79% support the Israeli actions. So that's a pretty big number, folks. Listen, we're going to break for 60. When we come back, we're going to talk about what's going on in the war in Ukraine, a little more politics, Trump, and some of these massive fines he's having to deal with. Be back in 60.
When I grow up, I want to work for a woke company, like super woke.
When I grow up,
I want to be hired based on what I look like,
rather than my skills.
I want to be judged
by my political beliefs. I want to get promoted
based on my chromosomes. When I grow up,
I want to be offended
by my coworkers
and walk around the office
on eggshells
and have my words policed
by HR. Words like
grandfather,
peanut gallery, long time no see,
no can do.
When I grow up,
I want to be obsessed with emotional safety and do workplace sensitivity training all day long.
When I grow up, I want to climb the corporate ladder
just by following the crowd.
I want to be a conformist.
I want to weaponize my pronouns. What are pronouns?
It's time to grow up and get back to work. Introducing the #1 woke-free job board in America, redballoon.work.
And we're back, folks. Listen, Fani Willis, interesting character here for the state of Georgia and Trump's trial there. Now, it appears that they've caught her in a straight lie because Fani apparently misrepresented her affair with her investigator. Now, Drew, there were some commentary that Miss Willis could possibly be facing a perjury charge. Have you talked about it a little bit? I mean, are we staring at the possibility not only the Trump case getting dismissed, and we don't know if that's going to be the case, but that the actual prosecutor in this case could be charged with a crime?
Well, sure. She should face perjury charges, and that's what the Trump team is trying to push for. Look, I mean, the what we're talking about here is Willis said, that her affair, relationship, whatever, with this individual began after she was appointed to the Trump case, right? I mean, that's important. But we've already heard testimony from her former friend and coworker, Robin Yurdy, who said it happened in 2019. She saw them snogging at some convention center or something like that. So already you have somebody directly refuting what Willis is saying about when the the relationship began. And the Trump team is trying to get access to phone records and all that because they could prove it pretty easily. Were you texting? What were you texting? We know that exists. And of course, they're fighting that because that would definitively prove. I mean, it's unfortunate because, you look at the J6 committee and all these corrupt Democrats and rhinos together, they can get access to any phone records they want, just like that. But here you have something legitimate that took place, perjury perhaps, more than likely, and we'll see if they can get access.
Yeah, I heard it was something like 2,000 phone calls. 2,000 calls. Man, that's a lot in whatever time period it is. And I don't know if you make 2,000 calls unless there's some type of relationship going on. Now, let's shift up north a little bit. Letitia James, I mean, here, this massive verdict against Trump, which, boy, folks, we hope this thing is overturned. I mean, if it's not, it will send shudders to anyone considering doing business in New York, which is why people continue to flee New York and come to Florida and other states. Drew, the interest alone on that debt that Trump is appealing, it's like $112,000 a day. I mean, it's something insane. I mean, it was outrageous enough that there was a conviction when nobody, literally, folks, nobody lost a dime. Not one lender, not one bank, nobody. And yet here, Trump is facing, possibly having to put up a bond while he appeals this judgment. I mean, Drew, where's this thing headed? And is there any way that this thing's going to get overturned, in your opinion?
Well, I think at some point it has to be overturned, whether it has to go all the way to the Supreme Court in some way. Everything seems headed to the Supreme Court. I mean, it depends on what's going to happen in the appeals process. But the issue here, they put this bomb in there, right? And he has to put up the money up front, like you're saying, in order to even appeal. And he had like a month to do it and come up with that money. Look, you can be a billionaire, but coming up with, whatever, $300-400 billion in liquid assets is absurd. It's a lot of money, obviously. And like you said, the interest alone is outrageous. But I mean, this is so, we've just been dealing with this kind of stuff for so long, this lawfare, and it's just crazy. I mean, it's difficult to formulate words to really talk about this because at its root, he didn't do anything wrong. That's the point. All of this is just like he said at the rally I heard at CPAC, it's bull, fill in the blank.
Yeah.
So that's what we're talking about here. And so they're just making this up. There's literally no crime. I mean, and then they want to bankrupt him over it. So it's frightening.
Yeah, it does remind me, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit, things that happened in the old Soviet Union, now in Russia. Speaking of that, Macron, the president of France, he threw a little innuendo out there that the international press has picked up on, basically floating the trial balloon that Western troops may be needed in Ukraine. Now, it's not going to come as any shock to most Americans that watch this show or listen to it, or any of our other distinguished guests who have been on Patriot.tv, but obviously we know we have a CIA presence in Ukraine. It's not going to shock anybody at all if all of a sudden we start seeing troops in support roles. But Drew, I mean, is this something Macron is doing to try to put some pressure on Congress to approve this Ukraine funding? Or is this just sort of what I call the mission creep to where, okay, it started off over 2 years, financial support and weapons support, and now it may be boots on the ground in Ukraine?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't put it past them to be serious about sending young Americans to die in Ukraine and elsewhere throughout the Western world. People have to remember that this could have all been prevented for the most part in the very beginning. And we went in there and got involved, NATO countries, for example, the US, the UK, and we made sure that no peace agreement was actually reached. So this is one of the most diabolical wars I'm aware of. You can disapprove of Putin, you can condemn Putin, you can hate Putin all day long, but just because he's a bad person doesn't make what's going on our end of this or in Ukraine right either. I mean, remember, Ukrainians are also the victims of what the West has done in terms of the behavior of escalating this. It's Ukrainians who are dead, not just because they're at war with Russia and Putin, but because we have permitted this to go on as long as it have. as it has, and we've even seemed to we're cheerleading the continuation of this conflict. And Ukraine, there's no young people left; they're all dead.
I want to add a few things to what you just talked about there from a perspective of from the Russian people. Now, we've all seen the horror stories of Alexei Navalny and the conditions in that polar prison that he eventually died in. But what's not talked about a lot is the other political prisoners that exist in Russia right now. Effectively, folks, a little history lesson here. Stalin created the Gulag system where political enemies literally were jailed and eventually killed in the old Soviet Union days. Fast forward to where we are today, some of those, quote, gulags become prisons to where political prisoners who are guilty of nothing other than opposing Vladimir Putin are effectively housed. And what happens to these political prisoners is horrific. There's some 700 plus at last count, according to United Nations, still sitting in Russian prisons. And what happens to those political prisoners? Lack of food, lack of medical care, beatings, isolationism, effectively trying to break them. So the reason I bring this up, I had an opportunity yesterday to interview 3 Russian dissidents. I actually invited them to come on future show, and they indicated they would consider it under one circumstance: if their identities were altered and we used artificial intelligence to disguise their voice. And it sort of struck me as the conversation evolved yesterday about what average Russian citizens, how utterly powerless they are in dealing with Vladimir Putin. You know, their prevailing theme was, yes, we'd like to come on and tell our story, but if we went back to Russia, the same thing that has happened to numerous political opposition to Putin would happen to them. All of them indicated they would be thrown in jail. And if they spoke out against the war, which is one of the reasons they were here in the United States, that their families could possibly have life experiences that are very negative, their relatives. I mean, there was genuine fear of Russian citizens as to what Putin is doing to his country. Now, again, Drew, I'm not trying to sympathize with Russians, but there's a big difference between the Russian people and Vladimir Putin and his henchmen who are running the country. Now, you know, I have sympathy for people who are forced to live under that type of regime. But when you think about it, Drew, the Russians, they've been in like 5 wars in the last 20 years, and it doesn't seem that anything changes. Vladimir Putin appears to be someone who's very insecure about himself, and yet here we are in a situation where Western Europe just recently sent $55 billion to Ukraine. The U.S. has $60 billion pending in a package, and now they're talking about possible troops in Ukraine. I mean, I have seen nothing but negatives come out of this for the last 2 years. The Russians took some territory. The Ukrainians fought back and got some. But I got to tell you, whether you're talking about the fighting in Ukraine or the, quote, soldiers that Putin is forcing into that meat grinder, this situation shows no signs of letting up. We got about 30 seconds, Drew. Close it out for us.
Yeah, look, I mean, I'll say nothing against those dissidents that have shared their experience with you. But I would say that what's happening on right now, which it's difficult to deal with this issue for anyone, is because we're talking about governments versus the people. And Ukraine, you know, Zelensky put Gonzalo Lira, an American citizen, in prison. Here we've got J6 protesters in the gulags on the Potomac. So we have a kind of worldwide issue right now, which is tyrannical governments beating down on the people. And none of the governments seem to be on the side of good for some reason. So it's hard to push back sometimes.
Well, it is difficult at times, but you know, we can always hope, and we can hope that our political leaders, even though we may differ with them on issues, we hope the geopolitical issues that they decide turn out to be best for the United States. Drew, thank you for joining me again today. Folks, we'll be back on Thursday. Stay sharp. It's going to get tough out there, but we are on a path to recovery with future President Donald Trump. Thanks for viewing. See you Thursday.